Russia's economy is collapsing. And here's the reason no one is talking about. Across Russia's heartland, the machines that once forged an empire are going quiet, and the silence is spreading fast. Assembly lines stop mid-cycle, lights flicker above empty floors, and workers wait for shifts that never come. It is not war tearing these factories apart. It is exhaustion, an economy collapsing from within. For years, the Kremlin promised that a war economy would keep the nation alive, but that illusion is breaking. Industrial output beyond the defense sector is shrinking, and the car plants, cement mills, and rail depots that once symbolized progress are turning into relics. Inside Moscow, officials still speak of resilience, yet across the country, the hum of production is fading. The machine that built modern Russia is seizing, and if the engines that once defined its power are already failing, what happens when the last of them finally stop? And the answer is, the illusion becomes clear, because what Moscow calls stability is really paralysis. Official reports still claim the economy is expanding, with Russia's industrial output rising about 5% in early 2025, according to Rosstat. But independent analysts say that growth is almost entirely driven by weapons production, while civilian industries keep shrinking. Factories that once built cars, trains, and tools are being forced to produce shells and armored trucks, and for every new contract signed by a defense supplier, another private manufacturer quietly closes its doors. The result is a distorted economy where activity rises on paper, even as real output for consumers and exports falls. According to the Russian Central Bank, non-military manufacturing dropped by more than 5% in 2025, the steepest contraction since the height of sanctions in 2022. Consumer goods production is down, supply chains are fractured, and entire sectors now depend on imported Chinese components that often arrive late or not at all. Meanwhile, inflation remains high, officially 8.1% in mid-2025, but everyday prices for essentials rise far faster in provincial cities where food and fuel costs can exceed 20% year-on-year. Households cut spending, factories lose demand, and production slows further, a feedback loop that tightens like a vice. Inside industrial hubs such as Nizhny Novgorod and Chelyabinsk, work weeks are shortened and salaries delayed. Managers call it efficiency, but workers know it as survival. As the war machine grows stronger, the rest of the economy is starving, and a system built on movement is learning what stillness feels like. And if the illusion of growth depends on war alone, what happens when even the war can no longer pay for itself? The answer is a slow tightening of every bolt in the system, where factories run on debt and the war consumes whatever is left. The Kremlin calls it strategic discipline, but for factories across Russia, it feels more like suffocation. The Central Bank of Russia has kept its key interest rate near 17% through most of 2025, after peaking at 21% earlier in the year, a level meant to control inflation, but one that now strangles borrowing and investment. For a business owner, that means paying more than 1/5 of every ruble in interest just to keep the lights on. Small and medium enterprises, already hurt by shrinking demand, have begun closing quietly. Industrial bankruptcies rose by nearly 30% in the first half of 2025, compared to last year. Even giants are tightening belts. Automakers such as Avtovaz and Kamaz have shortened work weeks and delayed new projects because loans to expand production have become unaffordable. The pain extends far beyond assembly lines. High interest rates push the ruble temporarily higher, but they also drive up mortgage costs and crush consumer spending. Inflation remains above 8%, while wages barely grow at half that pace. It is a trap that economists call stagflation, rising prices and falling growth, the worst of both worlds. To plug the widening deficit, Moscow has begun tapping its national wealth fund, selling off foreign reserves, and forcing state banks to buy government bonds. Each move buys time, but drains stability. The more the state borrows, the less private industry can breathe. Factories once built for growth now produce just enough to service debt. Managers juggle credit lines, workers accept delayed pay, and entire towns live from one budget extension to the next. The machine still moves, but only because it cannot afford to stop. And if even survival now requires borrowing from tomorrow, what happens when tomorrow finally arrives? The answer is already visible across Russia's factory towns, where the cost of tomorrow is being paid today. In Tolyatti, Yekaterinburg, and Perm, production lines run 3 days instead of 5, and the sound that once filled entire districts now comes only from the trains carrying workers home early. Officially, unemployment remains below 3%, yet the number hides a deeper problem. Millions are underemployed, working fewer hours for smaller paychecks. Independent economists estimate that up to 1 in 5 industrial workers is now part of this hidden unemployment, earning less than they did before the war, even as prices climb. Construction and materials firms are now facing the same suffocating slowdown. Samarsky Cement, one of Russia's largest producers, has imposed a 4-day workweek across its plants after public housing and infrastructure spending were diverted toward military projects. The Russian Union of Builders reports that new residential construction fell by 12% in 2025, and with mortgage rates above 17%, buyers have disappeared from the market. Timber producers like Sveza have closed mills due to collapsing exports and surging production costs, and thousands of rural workers are migrating to cities in search of temporary jobs. These are not statistics. They are the slow unraveling of a workforce that once held the country together. Factories feed cities, and when the factories fall, the cities follow. And if the people who built Russia's industry are now struggling to survive its collapse, what future is left for the nation that once called itself an industrial power? The answer is a future already taking shape, not after the war, but because of it. Russia's factories are not waiting for peace to rebuild. They are eroding in real time. And the longer the conflict lasts, the deeper the damage will run. Economists warn that even if the guns fell silent tomorrow, the economy would shrink for years before stabilizing, with output growth stuck below 1% and investment collapsing to its lowest share of GDP in 2 decades. And industrial output is already faltering. In 2025, Russia revised its growth forecast down to 1.5% as rising interest rates and shrinking investment drag every sector. The wartime surge that once masked decline is fading, leaving behind broken supply chains and hollowed-out industries. Even energy, which was once Moscow's shield, is losing its strength as refineries are damaged and oil is sold at heavy discounts, draining the treasury, while coal exports slip into loss as costs rise and demand fades. Beyond Russia's borders, the shock will not stay contained. Commodity prices, supply chains, and regional stability all hang in the balance. And if Russia's industrial heart has already stopped, the only real question left is not whether it will survive, but how far its failure will drag the rest of the world down with it.